The autumn wind swept across the parched lands north of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, carrying dust and the promise of an early winter. Clara Lorne stood at the edge of her property, watching the sun sink behind the jagged peaks, painting the sky the color of dried blood. The ranch stretched before her, 40 acres of stubborn earth that refused to yield much beyond scrub grass and sorrow. 6 months had passed since they'd found her husband Samuel's body near the southern fence line. 3 bullets in his back. The sheriff had asked his questions, made his notes, and ridden away with nothing more than empty promises. The people of Mercy's Bend whispered their theories in the general store and saloon, gambling debts, land disputes with the Henderson outfit, maybe even something darker that no one dared name aloud. Clara pulled her shawl tighter against the biting wind and turned back toward the house. Her 6-year-old son, Thomas, would be hungry soon, and the few remaining cattle needed tending. The ranch hands had all drifted away after Samuel's death, unwilling to work for a widow with no money and too many shadows hanging over her land. The house stood like a lonely sentinel against the darkening sky, adobe walls her husband had built with his own hands, now sheltering only memories and mounting fears. Each night, Clara barred the heavy oak door with a timber thick as her arm, checked the loaded Winchester by her bed, and lay awake listening to every creak and whisper in the darkness. As she reached the porch, movement near the gate caught her eye. A lone figure approached on foot, leading a tired-looking horse. Clara's hand moved instinctively to the Colt revolver tucked in her apron pocket, Samuel's gun, still carrying his fingerprints on the worn grip. The stranger stopped a respectful distance from the gate, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature gray. Even in the failing light, Clara could see the road dust coating his clothes, the weary slump of his shoulders. He was tall, lean in the way of men who'd known hunger, with a face carved by wind and hardship. "Evening, ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying a rasp that spoke of long silences. "Name's Eli Rafe. I'm looking for water for my horse and myself. Been riding hard from Las Cruces." Clara kept her hand on the revolver. "There's a stream 2 miles east. You can make it before full dark if you hurry." The man nodded slowly, as if he'd expected the refusal. His eyes, she could see them now, gray as winter clouds, held a peculiar steadiness that made her uncomfortable. Not threatening exactly, but knowing, as if he could read the fear behind her harsh words. "I understand, ma'am. Sorry to trouble you." He started to turn away, then paused. "Saw your barn roof from the ridge. Looks like the wind's been at it pretty hard. Might not last the winter storms." Clara glanced at the barn, where several sheets of tin roofing hung loose, banging in the wind like a broken drum. She'd noticed it days ago, but hadn't known how to fix it herself. "I'll manage," she said curtly. The stranger studied her for a long moment, then settled his hat back on his head. "I expect you will. Ma'am, good evening to you." She watched him lead his horse back down the dusty track, neither hurrying nor lingering. Something about his unhurried gait, the careful way he handled his tired mount, stirred an unwelcome curiosity in her chest. When he reached a cluster of cottonwoods near the dry creek bed, she saw him begin setting up a simple camp. No fire, just a bedroll and his horse picketed where it could reach the sparse grass. Clara retreated into the house, barring the door with perhaps more force than necessary. Thomas sat at the kitchen table, practicing his letters on a slate. "Who was that, Mama?" he asked without looking up. "Nobody. Just a drifter looking for water." "Did you give him some?" Clara busied herself at the stove, heating the pot of beans that would serve as their supper for the 3rd night running. He'll find his own. That night, after Thomas was asleep, Clara found herself at the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. She could barely make out the stranger's camp in the moonlight. He sat with his back against a tree, keeping watch over the empty land. The sight troubled her in ways she couldn't name. It had been months since anyone had come to the ranch who wasn't bringing bad news or worse intentions. The wind picked up around midnight, howling through the gaps in the barn roof. Clara lay in bed, listening to the tin sheets bang and scrape. Come morning, She'd have to try to secure them somehow, though she had no idea how to manage it alone. The ladder was heavy, and climbing onto a roof with hammer and nails while managing her skirts seemed an impossible task. Sleep finally took her near dawn, bringing dreams of Samuel, not as he'd been in life, with his quick smile and gentle hands, but cold and accusing, asking why she'd locked the door against him. She woke to the sound of hammering. Clara grabbed the Winchester and crept to the window. The stranger, Eli Rafe, was on her barn roof, securing the loose tin with practiced efficiency. His horse grazed peacefully nearby, and he worked as if he had every right to be there, as if fixing a widow's barn at sunrise was the most natural thing in the world. Anger flared in her chest. How dare he presume? She marched outside, not bothering with a shawl despite the morning chill. "What do you think you're doing?" she called up to him. He paused in his work, looking down at her with those unsettling gray eyes. "Morning, ma'am. Wind kept me awake last night with all that banging. Figured I'd fix it before moving on." "I didn't ask for your help." "No, ma'am, you didn't." He drove another nail home with 3 precise strikes. "But the barn did." The simple logic of it left her momentarily speechless. She stood there, rifle in hand, watching him work. He moved with economy and skill, wasting neither motion nor materials. Within an hour, the roof was secure. He climbed down, gathered his tools, her tools, she realized, from the barn, and returned them carefully to their places. Only then did he approach her, stopping well outside arm's reach. "I'll be on my way now," he said. "Sorry if I overstepped." Something in her chest twisted, pride warring with practicality. The roof was fixed, would hold through winter now. She hadn't had to ask, hadn't had to admit she couldn't manage alone. "There's coffee," she heard herself say, "and biscuits from yesterday." He studied her face, seeming to weigh the offer against whatever he saw there. "That's kind of you, ma'am." They ate on the porch, maintaining careful distance. Clara noticed the way he held his cup, the slight tremor in his left hand that spoke of old injury. His clothes, though trail-worn, were clean and mended with small, neat stitches. Everything about him suggested a man who took care with details, who had learned to depend on himself alone. "You heading somewhere particular?" she asked, surprising herself with the question. "North, maybe. Haven't decided." He gazed out at the mountains. Sometimes a man just needs to keep moving until he finds a reason to stop. Thomas appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He stared at the stranger with the frank curiosity of childhood. "You fixed our barn." The boy said, "I did. My PA was going to fix it, but he died." Clara's breath caught, but Eli simply nodded. "I'm sorry to hear that, son. It's hard when the people we count on can't be there anymore." Thomas seemed to consider this. "Can you fix other things?" "Thomas," Clara warned. But Eli smiled, the first time she'd seen any warmth crack his weathered features. "What needs fixing? The corral gate sticks, and the pump handle's loose, and—" "Thomas, Mr. Rafe has his own business to attend to. It's all right," Eli said quietly. He looked at Clara. "I could use a day's rest before moving on. If you've got work needs doing, I'm willing to trade labor for meals and a place to lay my bedroll." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse. She didn't know this man, didn't trust the way his presence seemed to fill up the empty spaces Samuel had left behind. But winter was coming, and the list of repairs grew longer each day. "Just for today," she said finally. He touched the brim of his hat. "Just for today." But as she watched him walk toward the corral with Thomas chattering at his heels, Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in 6 months, the dangerous stirring of hope. It frightened her more than all the night sounds and whispered threats combined. Hope was a luxury a widow in hostile territory couldn't afford. She gripped the porch rail, watching the stranger examine the broken gate while her son handed him tools with eager enthusiasm. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the chill, and Clara made herself a promise. She would let him fix what needed fixing, feed him for his trouble, and send him on his way. She would not let him fix her. 1 day stretched into 3, then a week, each morning. Clara told herself she would send Eli Rafe on his way, and each evening found another reason to delay. The corral gate no longer stuck. The pump handle worked smooth as butter. The chicken coop had new wire, the smokehouse a patched roof, and the wood pile grew tall against the side of the house. "I can't pay you proper wages," Clara said one evening as they sat on opposite ends of the porch, watching Thomas chase fireflies in the dying light. "Not in cash money." Eli sipped the coffee she'd brought him. "Haven't asked for any. A man's got to eat through winter, got to have purpose. Been eating fine here." He paused. "As for purpose, well, fixing things that need fixing seems purpose enough for now." She studied his profile in the twilight. The harsh lines of his face had softened somewhat with regular meals and rest, but his eyes still carried that weight she'd noticed the first day. He never spoke of where he'd been or what had driven him to wander. She never asked. "Winter's coming hard this year," she said. "I can feel it in the wind. Your wood supply won't last past January." "I know. Could cut some from the canyon, if you'd allow it. Split it proper, stack it right. Wouldn't take but a few weeks." Clara's hands tightened on her own cup. A few weeks. The words hung between them like a question neither quite dared to ask outright. Having him here had awakened something she'd thought buried with Samuel. Not desire, exactly, but the simple comfort of another adult's presence, someone to share the weight of keeping a household running. "I suppose that would be practical," she said finally. He nodded, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. Practical. They developed a routine without ever discussing it. Eli slept in the barn, taking his meals on the porch when weather allowed, at the kitchen table when it didn't. He worked from sunrise to sunset, seemingly inexhaustible despite his lean frame. Clara found herself watching him more than she cared to admit. The economical grace of his movements, the careful way he handled tools, the patience he showed with Thomas's endless questions. It was that patience that first cracked her defenses. Samuel had loved their son, but he'd been a man of few words, uncomfortable with the boy's chatter. Eli answered every question seriously, taught Thomas to whittle, showed him how to track rabbits in the dust. "You're good with him," she said one afternoon, finding them bent over a piece of harness that needed mending. Eli's hand stilled for just a moment. "He's a fine boy, smart, curious about the world. His father used to say he asked too many questions. No such thing as too many questions. It's how we learn." That night, Clara allowed herself to wonder for the first time what kind of man Eli Rafe had been before the road claimed him. Had he been a father? A husband? The careful way he folded his few belongings, the neat stitches in his mended clothes, suggested someone had taught him domestic skills. Or perhaps loss had taught him to value what remained. The next morning brought riders. Clara was drawing water when she spotted the dust cloud. 3 men, riding with the lazy confidence of those who expected no resistance. She recognized Jake Dalton immediately, Samuel's younger brother, with the same dark hair but none of the kindness. The other 2 were hired hands from the Henderson spread. "Clara," Jake touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. "Looking well for a woman in mourning. State your business." "Jake." His eyes swept the yard, noting the repairs, the stacked wood, the general air of order that had been missing for months. "Just checking on my brother's widow, making sure you're managing all right out here alone. As you can see, I'm managing fine." "Are you now?" Jake dismounted, his companions following suit. "Funny thing, I heard tell you'd taken on help. Thought I'd come see for myself." Eli emerged from the barn. Moving with that unhurried stride Clara had come to recognize meant he was very much alert. He carried a pitchfork, but the way he held it suggested it could become something else if needed. Jake's eyes narrowed. Well, and who might you be?" "Name's Rafe. I work for Mrs. Lorne." "Do you now?" Jake circled closer, and Clara saw Eli shift his weight slightly. "You look familiar. Friend, we met before." "Don't believe so." "No? Funny. I could swear I've seen your face somewhere." Jake's smile was all teeth. Maybe on a poster? The air went still. Clara's hand found the pocket where she kept Samuel's revolver, though she knew it was empty. She'd been meaning to buy ammunition but hadn't made the trip to town. "You're mistaken," Eli said calmly. "Maybe not." Jake turned back to Clara. "You might want to be careful who you trust. Clara, Sam trusted the wrong people, and look where it got him. Are you threatening me, Jake?" "Threatening? No, ma'am, just offering friendly advice. See, Sam and I had some unfinished business when he died, papers he was supposed to sign, about the water rights to the eastern section. Samuel never mentioned any papers. Didn't he? Well, that's unfortunate. Still, family's family. I'm sure we can work something out." His eyes slid back to Eli. "Once you've cleared out the riffraff." Eli set the pitchfork aside deliberately. "Mrs. Lorne asked you to state your business. Seems to me you've done that." Jake's hand dropped to his gun belt. "You giving me orders? Drifter?" "Jake." Clara stepped forward. "Get off my land." "Your land? For how long?" "Clara!" But he backed toward his horse, his men following. "You think about what I said, about those papers. I'll be back in a week. Maybe by then your hired help will have moved on to healthier climates." They watched the riders disappear into the distance. Clara's legs felt weak, and she sank onto the porch steps. Eli stood guard until the dust settled completely, then slowly approached. "He's right, isn't he?" Clara asked without looking up. "About the poster." Eli was quiet for a long moment. "There might be paper on me in Texas, maybe New Mexico too. What did you do?" "What I had to—" She looked up at him then, searching his face. "Did you kill someone?" "Yes." The simple honesty of it struck her like a physical blow. She'd known, somehow, from the moment she'd seen him handle Samuel's revolver with such familiarity, checking the chambers with practiced ease. But knowing and hearing it confirmed were different things. "I should go," he said. "Tonight, before I bring more trouble to your door." "Jake's been trouble since the day I met him. That's got nothing to do with you." "It will if he checks those posters too close." Clara stood, surprised to find her legs steady. "What's your real name? Your full name?" "Eli Rafe McCready." "And the man you killed?" His jaw tightened. "Men, 3 of them. They were hurting someone who couldn't defend herself. I stopped them. And they're calling that murder?" One of them was a judge's son. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Justice had different meanings depending on who your family was. How much money lined your pockets? She'd learned that lesson when the sheriff barely investigated Samuel's death, too eager to write it off as a robbery gone wrong. "A week," she said. "Jake said he'd be back in a week. I'll be gone by then." "No." The word surprised them both. Clara took a breath. "No, you'll stay. Finish the wood cutting. Fix the roof on the main house. Whatever Jake's planning, he's been planning it since before you arrived. Running won't change that." "Clara," it was the first time he'd used her given name. The sound of it in his rough voice did something unexpected to her pulse. "I'm not Sam," she said firmly. "I don't trust the wrong people. But I know what I see. You've been nothing but honest work and decent behavior since you arrived. That counts for something." He studied her with those gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "You don't know me. Not really. I know you fixed my barn without being asked. I know you're patient with my son. I know you could have robbed us blind that first night and ridden on." She lifted her chin. "That's more than I knew about half the men Samuel called friends." That night, dinner was a quiet affair. Thomas sensed the tension and ate without his usual chatter. After he was in bed, Clara found Eli on the porch, whittling in the moonlight. "Tell me about her," Clara said, settling into the other chair. "The woman you defended." His hand stilled. "Why?" "Because if you're going to stay, I need to know who I'm trusting." He was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, her name was Maria, 15 years old, daughter of a Mexican family that worked one of the big ranches. The judge's son and his friends had been drinking, decided they wanted some entertainment. His voice went flat. Her father tried to stop them first. They shot him down like a dog. Clara's stomach turned. She'd heard such stories, whispered between women when the men weren't listening. I was passing through, heard the screaming. He resumed whittling, each stroke precise and controlled. By the time I was done, Maria was safe. The men were not, and they hanged you for it. Tried to. I declined the invitation. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch. Declined? Forcefully. They sat in companionable silence, the night sounds of the desert surrounding them. Finally, Clara stood. Eli? He looked up. Thank you for telling me. He nodded once. Lock your door tonight. Load that revolver you keep touching, just in case. How did you? But of course he knew. A man who'd lived by his wits and his gun hand would notice such things. Good night, Eli. Good night, Clara. As she barred the door and loaded Samuel's gun for the first time in months, Clara realized she felt safer than she had since the day they'd brought her husband's body home. It should have frightened her, trusting a self-confessed killer. Instead, she slept better than she had in months, knowing Eli Rafe McCready stood watch in her barn. The days that followed Jake's visit passed in a strange tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. Eli worked with renewed intensity, cutting and splitting wood from dawn to dusk, as if trying to leave Clara with enough to last years rather than months. She found herself stealing glances at him throughout the day, memorizing the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the careful precision of his movements. At night, she dreamed of Samuel less and less. When she did, his face was distant, blurred, like a reflection in disturbed water. Sometimes she woke with guilt sitting heavy on her chest. Other times, she woke with a different ache altogether, one that had nothing to do with grief. It was Thomas who first bridged the growing awareness between them. 3 days after Jake's visit, the boy fell from the corral fence, scraping his knee badly. Clara was in the root cellar when she heard his cries. By the time she emerged, Eli had already scooped the boy up, carrying him to the porch with gentle efficiency. It's all right, son, Eli murmured, his voice steady and calm. Just a scrape. We'll clean it up good. Clara rushed for water and clean cloth, her hands shaking slightly. When she returned, Eli had Thomas sitting on the porch rail, distracting him with a story about a horse he'd once known that was afraid of butterflies. Hold still now, Clara said, kneeling to clean the wound. Thomas whimpered but didn't pull away. Eli kept talking, his voice weaving a spell of words that held the boy's attention. Clara worked quickly, aware of Eli's presence above her, the way he steadied Thomas with careful hands. There, she said, tying off the bandage. Good as new. Thomas sniffled. Will it leave a scar? Maybe a small one. Eli said, Scars aren't so bad. They're just stories written on our skin. The boy brightened. Do you have scars? With stories? Thomas, Clara warned. But Eli was already rolling up his sleeve, revealing a puckered mark on his forearm. This one's from a Mustang that didn't want to be rode, and this, he pointed to a thin line near his wrist, is from fixing fence in a hailstorm. Man's got to be mighty foolish to work in a hailstorm, but the cattle were pushing through. Thomas was entranced. Clara found herself studying Eli's arms, the history written there in damaged flesh. Without thinking, she reached out, her fingers barely grazing the Mustang scar. The world stopped. Eli went completely still. Clara felt heat flood her cheeks, but she couldn't seem to pull her hand away. His skin was warm, roughened by sun and work. She could feel his pulse beneath her fingertips, quick and strong. Mama? Thomas's voice broke the spell. Clara snatched her hand back, standing so quickly she nearly knocked over the water basin. You should rest that leg. Thomas, no more fence climbing today. She fled to the kitchen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the window, she could see Eli helping Thomas down from the rail, his movements carefully controlled. He didn't look toward the house. That evening, Eli didn't come for supper. Clara found him in the barn, mending harness by lantern light. I kept a plate warm, she said from the doorway. Not hungry just now. Thank you. She should leave, should respect the distance he was trying to create. Instead, she stepped into the barn, breathing the familiar sense of hay and leather and horse. I'm sorry, she said. About earlier, I didn't mean to. Clara. He set down the harness, but didn't turn to face her. You don't need to apologize. Don't I? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked at her, his gray eyes were dark with something that made her breath catch. I'm not a good man, he said quietly. I've done things, seen things, the kind of things that change a person deep down where it counts. We've all done things, not like this. He stood, pacing to the barn door to stare out at the night. That story I told your boy, about scars being stories? Some stories are better left unread. Clara moved closer, drawn despite herself. Tell me one, he laughed, short and bitter. You don't want... Tell me. He turned to face her, and she saw the war in his eyes. Finally. He reached for his shirt buttons, undoing them with steady hands. The lantern light flickered across his chest, revealing a landscape of violence. Scars crisscrossed his skin, some old and faded, others newer. But it was the burn marks that made her gasp, round and deliberate, following the line of his ribs. Railroad camp prison, he said flatly. After they caught me the first time, before I managed to escape, the guards had peculiar ideas about rehabilitation. Clara's hand moved without her permission, reaching toward the marks. This time, he caught her wrist, his grip gentle but firm. Don't, he said roughly. I'm not one of your broken fences or loose barn doors. You can't fix me. Clara, I'm not trying to fix you. Aren't you? His thumb moved against her wrist, perhaps unconsciously. Kind woman like you, taking in strays, feeding them up, giving them purpose. What else would you call it? She pulled her hand free, anger flaring. Is that what you think? That you're some project to me? Poor widow Clara. So desperate for company she'll take in any saddle tramp that fixes her roof? I didn't say you did. Maybe not in words, but it's what you meant. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. I've been alone 6 months. Eli, 6 months of people looking at me with pity or suspicion. 6 months of Jake circling like a vulture, of lying awake wondering if tonight's the night someone decides a widow alone is easy pickings. Her voice broke slightly. Then you show up, and for the first time since they put Sam in the ground. I sleep through the night. I watch my son smile again. I feel like maybe, just maybe, I can do this. And you think it's because I want to fix you. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Eli rebuttoned his shirt, his movement slow. I'm sorry, he said. I shouldn't have said that. No, you shouldn't have. He moved toward her, stopping just outside arm's reach. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me and saw anything but trouble. I don't quite know what to do with it. You could try accepting it. Like it's that simple? Maybe it is. She met his eyes steadily. Maybe we make it harder than it needs to be. He laughed softly, running a hand through his hair. You're a dangerous woman, Clara Lorne. Am I? Very. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell wood smoke and leather on his clothes. The kind of dangerous that makes a man think about things he's got no business thinking. Her heart was racing again. Such as what it would be like to stay, to wake up every morning knowing exactly where he was and why, to build something instead of running from something. His voice dropped lower. To touch her hair when the lamplight catches it just so. Clara couldn't breathe. The barn suddenly felt too small, too warm. Eli, he stepped back abruptly, the moment shattering. I should check the horses. Eli, wait! But he was already moving past her, careful not to touch. Clara stood alone in the lantern light, her skin still tingling where he'd held her wrist. Outside. She could hear him speaking softly to the horses, the same gentle tone he used with Thomas. She returned to the house on unsteady legs. Through her bedroom window, she watched the barn, saw his shadow moving in the lamplight, Her body felt strange, awakened in ways she'd forgotten were possible. It had been different with Samuel. Comfortable, expected, the natural progression of courtship to marriage bed. This was something else entirely, something that scorched and demanded. In her dreams that night, scarred hands moved over her skin with reverent care, and she woke with Samuel's name unspoken on her lips and another man's burning behind her eyes. The next morning, Eli was gone before dawn, leaving only a note that he'd gone to cut wood in the canyon. He didn't return until well after dark, exhausted and covered in sawdust. The pattern continued for 3 days, leaving early, returning late, maintaining careful distance. Clara understood. He was trying to rebuild the walls between them, to return to the simple arrangement of work for food and shelter. But something fundamental had shifted that night in the barn. She found herself listening for his footsteps, watching for him through windows, her skin prickling with awareness whenever he was near. On the 4th night, unable to sleep, she wrapped herself in a shawl and stepped onto the porch. The moon was new, leaving the stars to provide what light they could. She wasn't surprised to find Eli sitting on the steps, his back against the post. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked softly. He glanced up at her. "Guard duty." "From what?" "Whatever needs guarding against." She sat beside him, careful to leave space between them. "Jake's week is almost up." "I know. Will you still be here when he comes?" He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Do you want me to be?" "Yes." The simple honesty of it seemed to surprise him. He turned to look at her fully, and in the starlight, she could see the question in his eyes. "Why?" he asked. "Because you make me feel safe. Because Thomas needs a man's influence. Because—" She stopped, gathering courage. "Because when you're not here, the house feels empty in a way it didn't before you came. Clara, I know what you're going to say. That you're trouble. That you'll bring danger to our door. That you're not the settling kind." She lifted her chin. "I'm not asking you to settle. I'm not asking you for anything except to be here tomorrow. And the day after, if you're willing, one day at a time." He studied her face in the darkness. "You know what people will say. A widow taking in a gunman with a past. Let them talk. They talk anyway. And if Jake makes good on his threats, then I'll face that with someone beside me instead of alone." Slowly, as if moving against his better judgment, Eli reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, rough and warm. "You deserve better than a man with blood on his hands," he said softly. "Maybe, but you're who's here." He made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. His hand dropped, but not before his thumb brushed across her cheekbone in a touch so gentle it made her eyes burn. "One day at a time," he repeated. "Yes." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. When Clara finally rose to go inside, Eli caught her hand briefly. "Thank you," he said simply. She squeezed his fingers once before letting go. "Good night, Eli. Good night, Clara." Inside, she pressed her back against the closed door, her heart racing with something that felt dangerously like hope. Through the window, she could see him resuming his watch, guardian of a threshold she'd already invited him to cross. One day at a time, she reminded herself. But as she climbed the stairs to her empty bed, she wondered how many more days she could maintain this careful distance when every instinct screamed for something more. The storm arrived 2 days before Jake's promised return, sweeping down from the mountains with a fury that turned the world white. Clara had seen the signs, the way the cattle huddled together, the ache in her bones that spoke of changing weather, but nothing could have prepared her for the blizzard's intensity. It started with fat, lazy flakes that Thomas tried to catch on his tongue. Within hours, the wind had risen to a howl, driving snow horizontal across the yard. By nightfall, drifts were piling against the doors and windows, sealing them inside a world reduced to the space between walls. "We need to bring the horses into the barn," Eli said, peering through the kitchen window at the white chaos beyond. "They'll freeze in the lean-to. You can't go out in this," Clara protested. You won't be able to see 2 feet ahead. I'll tie a rope from the porch to the barn. Done it before. Before she could argue further, he was wrapping himself in every layer he could find. Clara watched anxiously as he secured one end of her clothesline to the porch post and disappeared into the swirling white. Time stretched endlessly until she saw him emerge again, leading the horses one by one to safety. When he finally stumbled back inside, he was coated in snow, his lips blue with cold. Clara pulled him to the stove, helping him out of the frozen outer layers. "You're half frozen," she scolded, chafing his hands between hers. "I'm all right," but his teeth were chattering. "Thomas, bring the quilt from my bed," Clara ordered, "and heat some water for coffee." She settled Eli in Samuel's old chair by the fire and tried not to think about how right he looked there. As feeling returned to his extremities, he winced. "Hurts worse warming up than freezing," he muttered. "Serves you right for taking such a fool risk. Those horses are your livelihood. They're not worth your life." He looked up at her, something unreadable in his gray eyes. "Aren't they?" The question hung between them as Thomas returned with the quilt. Clara wrapped it around Eli's shoulders, her hands lingering perhaps a moment too long. The storm had given her an excuse to touch him, to fuss over him, and she found herself reluctant to step away. They spent that first night of the storm in the kitchen, the warmest room in the house. Clara made a pallet on the floor for Thomas, who fell asleep to the sound of Eli's quiet voice telling stories of other storms, other times, when the boy's breathing deepened into sleep. A comfortable silence fell between the adults. "How long do you think it will last?" Clara asked, watching the snow pile higher against the window. 3 days, maybe 4. These early storms blow themselves out quick, but they're fierce while they last. "Jake won't come in this weather." "No, but he'll come after." Clara pulled her shawl tighter. "I've been thinking about what he said, about papers Samuel was supposed to sign. Water rights are valuable in this country. Samuel would never have signed away our water. It's the only thing that makes this land worth having." She stared into the fire. "But Jake's not the type to let that stop him. He's always been one to take what he wanted." "Is that what happened to your husband? He wouldn't sign." The question she'd been dreading, asked so gently she couldn't take offense. "I don't know. He tried to shield me from business matters. Said it wasn't fitting for a woman to worry about such things." She laughed bitterly. "Look where that got me. He was trying to protect you. He left me defenseless, ignorant of our own affairs, of who we owed and who owed us." She met Eli's eyes. "I won't make that mistake again. No," he said quietly. "I don't believe you will." The wind howled harder, rattling the windows in their frames. Eli rose to check the barriers, making sure snow wasn't forcing its way through the cracks. Clara watched him move through her kitchen with easy familiarity, knowing where everything was, fitting into the space as if he'd always belonged there. "You should try to sleep," he said. "I'll keep watch." "Watch for what? Nothing's moving in this storm?" "Habit." But she recognized the truth. He couldn't fully relax, couldn't let down his guard even in the middle of a blizzard. It broke her heart and made her feel safer all at once. "At least sit with me a while," she said. "The storm's lonely enough without adding silence to it." He hesitated, then settled back into the chair. They talked quietly, careful not to wake Thomas, about inconsequential things at first. Horses and weather and the best way to preserve meat through summer. But as the night deepened, their words did too. "I had a wife once," Eli said suddenly, staring into the fire. "And a daughter." Clara held her breath, afraid any response would stop the flow of words. "Sarah, that was my wife's name. Sweet girl, too young when I married her. But she said she loved me." He smiled sadly. "Our daughter was Emma, 4 years old, last time I saw her. Had her mother's eyes and my stubbornness." "What happened?" "Comanche raid. While I was away buying cattle, found them when I got back." His voice went flat, emotionless. "The things they did. Sarah lived long enough to beg me to take care of Emma. But Emma was already gone. Clara reached across the space between them, covering his hand with hers. He didn't pull away. After that, nothing much mattered. I drifted, hired my gun out to whoever paid best, did things I'm not proud of. Would have died that way, probably. Except I rode through that town in Texas and heard Maria screaming, and saved her. Too late for her father. Too late for my soul, probably. But she lived. Last I heard, she'd married a good man, had babies of her own. He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. Sometimes I think saving her was the only clean thing I ever did. That's not true. Clara squeezed his hand. Every day you've been here, you've done good, every repair, every kindness to Thomas, every... Clara, his thumb stroked across her knuckles. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not, I see you clearly. Eli McCready, the good and the bad together. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her breath catch. You're playing with fire. I know. I'm trying to do the right thing here, trying to keep my distance, keep you safe. I don't want safe, the words burst out of her, surprising them both. I had safe with Samuel, safe and proper and careful. Look where it got me, alone in a storm with wolves circling. I'm one of those wolves. Clara. No. She leaned forward, still gripping his hand. You're the one keeping them at bay. The fire crackled. The wind howled. Thomas stirred in his sleep, and still they sat, hands clasped, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. Tell me about him, Eli said finally. Your husband. Clara smiled sadly. He was a good man, gentle. He courted me properly, asked my father's permission, did everything right. We were content. But, she'd never admitted it aloud, had barely admitted it to herself. But there was no fire, no passion. I thought that would come with time, but... She shrugged. We were partners, friends, even. But when he died, I grieved the life we'd built more than the man himself. What kind of wife does that make me? An honest one. He deserved better. Maybe. Or maybe he had exactly what he wanted. A good woman, a son, a piece of land to call his own. Eli's grip tightened slightly. Not everyone needs fire. Clara, some folks are happier with warm coals. And you? What do you need? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I used to think I needed nothing. That wanting things, caring about things, only led to pain. But lately... Lately? He lifted their joined hands, studying them in the firelight. Lately, I find myself wanting things I've got no right to want. The air between them crackled with more than hearth fire. Clara felt her pulse racing, her skin too warm despite the storm raging outside. She should pull away, retreat to safety. Instead, she leaned closer. Eli, don't... His voice was rough. If you say my name like that again, I won't be able to... To what? To keep being noble, to sleep in that cold barn one more night. To pretend I don't lie awake thinking about. He broke off, releasing her hand abruptly. I should check the fire in the other room. But when he stood, Clara rose too, blocking his path. What if I don't want you to be noble? You don't know what you're saying. Don't I? She lifted her chin, meeting his eyes steadily. I'm a grown woman, Eli, a widow. I know exactly what I'm saying. He caught her shoulders, his grip gentle but firm. And tomorrow, when the storm passes and daylight shows you clear what kind of man you're taking to your bed, then tomorrow I'll make the same choice I'm making tonight. Clara. She silenced him by placing her fingers against his lips. Stop trying to save me from myself. I don't need saving. I need... She broke off, suddenly uncertain. What? His breath was warm against her fingertips. What do you need? You, she whispered. Just you. The last thread of his control snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers with desperate hunger. Clara made a soft sound of surprise that melted into something else entirely as he deepened the kiss. This was nothing like Samuel's careful pecks. This was fire and demand and promise all at once. when they broke apart, both breathing hard. Eli rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness." "Yes, I'll hurt you. Men like me always hurt the people who what?" But he was already pulling back, that careful distance returning. "We can't, not with Thomas right there, not like this." The rejection stung, but Clara recognized the truth in it. "No," she agreed softly. "Not like this." They stood there, inches apart but no longer touching, while the storm raged around them. Finally, Eli stepped back. "I'll sit up. Keep the fires going." "Eli, please, Clara, let me do this right. Let me court you proper, as much as a man like me can. You deserve that much at least." Despite everything, she felt herself smile. "Court me? In the middle of a blizzard? If you'll have me." He managed a crooked smile of his own. "Though I warn you, I'm out of practice, and we're a bit limited on social calls and Sunday drives at present. I think we can make do." He lifted her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture so tender it made her eyes burn. "Sleep now. I'll be here. Promise?" "I promise." Clara returned to her room, but sleep remained elusive. Through the thin walls, she could hear Eli moving about, tending the fires, his quiet footsteps a comforting rhythm. The storm that trapped them had also freed them, stripping away the careful barriers they'd maintained. When it passed, they would have to face the world again. Jake, the town's judgment, the shadow of Eli's past. But for now, in this snow-wrapped cocoon, they had found each other. And that, Clara thought as she finally drifted toward sleep, was worth any storm that might follow. The storm broke on the fourth day, leaving behind a world transformed. Snow lay thick as a blanket, smoothing out the harsh edges of the landscape until everything looked soft and new. Clara stood at the window, watching the sun turn the drifts into diamonds, and felt a similar transformation inside herself. The days trapped together had worn away the last of their careful boundaries. She'd grown used to Eli's presence in the house, the way he moved through her kitchen, how he unconsciously checked the windows and doors, always vigilant even in supposed safety. Thomas had taken to following him everywhere, chattering about tracks in the snow and how to tell when more weather was coming. "Riders coming," Eli said quietly from behind her. Clara's stomach dropped. Through the glare of sun on snow, she could make out 3 figures on horseback, moving slowly through the drifts. Jake, as promised, with his hired men. "Take Thomas to his room," Eli said. "Keep the rifle handy." "What are you going to do?" "Talk to him, that's all." But his hand rested on his gun belt, and Clara saw the change in him, the lazy grace becoming coiled readiness. "Eli, it'll be all right." He touched her cheek briefly. "Trust me." She wanted to argue, to insist he let her stand beside him. But Thomas was already picking up on the tension, his small face worried. "Come on, sweetheart," she said, taking her son's hand. "Let's go read a story." From Thomas's window, she watched Eli step onto the porch as the riders approached. Jake dismounted, his companions staying on their horses. Smart, Clara thought bitterly. Harder to draw on a mounted man. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. Jake gestured toward the house, toward the barn, his movements sharp with aggression. Eli stood perfectly still, responding with short sentences. The conversation grew more heated, Jake stepping closer, trying to use his size to intimidate. It happened fast. Jake reached for his gun, but Eli was faster, impossibly fast. His weapon cleared leather and leveled before Jake's hand even touched his grip. The hired men went for their rifles, then froze as Eli's aim never wavered from Jake. "Mama?" Thomas whispered. "Is Mr. Eli going to shoot Uncle Jake?" Clara pulled him close. "No, sweetheart, he's just talking." Long minutes passed. Finally, Jake stepped back, hands raised. He said something that made Eli's jaw tighten, but the gun remained steady. The hired men helped Jake mount up, and all 3 rode away, faster than they'd come. Eli stood on the porch until they were out of sight, then slowly holstered his weapon. When he turned toward the house, Clara saw something in his face that chilled her more than the storm had. She met him at the door. What did he say? He knows who I am. Says he sent a telegram to the Rangers. They'll be here within the week. The world seemed to tilt. Then we'll explain. Tell them what really happened. Clara. His voice was gentle but firm. There's no explaining to be done. I'm wanted for killing 3 men, one of them connected. They'll hang me or send me back to that prison camp. And this time, I won't escape. No. She gripped his arms. No, there has to be another way. There is. He covered her hands with his. I leave tonight. Draw them away from here. And Jake wins. He gets the ranch, the water rights, everything. You'll be alive. Thomas will be safe. That's what matters. That's not... She broke off as Thomas appeared in the doorway. Are you leaving, Mr. Eli? The boy asked, his voice small. Eli knelt to Thomas's level. I have to go away for a while. Partner, but you'll come back? Clara saw Eli's throat work. I'll try. That's what Pa said. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He didn't come back. Thomas, Clara started. But Eli pulled the boy into a hug. Your PA wanted to come back. Sometimes wanting isn't enough. He pulled back, meeting Thomas's eyes. But you know what? While I'm gone, you're the man of the house. You take care of your mother for me. All right? Thomas nodded solemnly, tears streaming down his cheeks. Clara's own eyes burned as she watched Eli stand, ruffling the boy's hair one last time. Go on inside, she told Thomas. I need to talk to Mr. Eli. When they were alone, Clara turned on him. You can't leave. Not now. Not after... After what? A few kisses? Some pretty words during a storm? His voice was harsh, but she saw the pain in his eyes. This was always temporary. Clara, we both knew that. I don't... She stepped closer. I know you're scared. I'm not scared. But his hands were fists at his sides. Yes, you are. Not of the Rangers or Jake or even hanging. You're scared of this. She gestured between them. Of staying, of mattering to someone again. Clara, I love you. The words hung in the cold air between them. Eli went completely still, his face a mask of shock. You can't, but I do. She lifted her chin. I've been falling in love with you since the day you fixed my barn without asking. Maybe I'm a fool. Maybe it's too fast or too complicated or too dangerous. But I know my own heart. Eli McCready. And it's yours if you want it. He made a sound like he'd been punched. You don't know what you're saying. Stop telling me what I know and don't know. She caught his face between her hands. I know you're a good man who's done hard things. I know you make me feel alive in ways I never have before. I know the thought of you leaving feels like my heart being torn from my chest. Clara, please. I know I want you to stay and fight for this, for us, for the life we could build together. He gripped her wrists, not pulling her hands away but holding them there. And when they hang me, when Thomas has to watch another father figure die, when you're alone again, but this time with my blood on your conscience, that won't happen. You don't know that. No. She stroked her thumbs across his cheekbones. But I know that's sending you away, letting fear make our choices for us. That's not living, that's just existing. And I've done enough of that. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. You're killing me. I'm trying to save you, save us both, by asking me to stay and face a noose, by asking you to believe that some things are worth fighting for, that you're worth fighting for. When he opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. I can't lose another family. Clara, I can't. It would finish me. Then don't. She pulled his head down, pressing her forehead to his. Stay. Help me fight Jake legally. We'll hire a lawyer. Contest whatever claim he thinks he has. And if the Rangers come, we'll face that too. Together. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. She pulled back to meet his eyes. Do you love me? The question seemed to break something in him. God help me, yes. More than I thought I could love anything again. Then stay. Clara. She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her desperation, her love, her certainty into it. He resisted for a heartbeat, then surrendered, pulling her against him with a groan. This kiss was different from the others, deeper, tinged with sorrow and fierce hope in equal measure. When they broke apart, both breathing raggedly, Clara kept her arms around his neck. Please, give us a chance. Give yourself a chance. He studied her face, and she saw the war in his eyes, fear against hope, past against future, the safety of solitude against the terrifying possibility of happiness. All right, he whispered finally. God help me. All right, I'll stay. Clara made a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and pulled him close. They stood there in the doorway, clinging to each other while the sun turned the snow to gold around them. But we do this smart, Eli said against her hair. I won't just sit and wait for them to come. We need to prepare, plan, and if it looks like, if there's no way out, you have to let me run, for Thomas's sake, if not your own. We'll see. Clara, I mean it. She pulled back to look at him. And I mean it too. We'll see. But for now, you're staying. That's enough. That night, for the first time, Eli slept in the house, not in her bed. They weren't ready for that final step with Thomas in the next room, but on a proper mattress in the small room off the kitchen. Clara lay awake, acutely aware of his presence just walls away, and felt a peace she hadn't known in months. The next morning brought unexpected allies. Mary Henderson, wife of the largest rancher in the valley, arrived just after breakfast. Clara had barely spoken to the woman since Samuel's funeral, but here she was, picking her way through the snow in her fine boots. Mrs. Henderson, Clara said, surprised. Please, come in. The older woman settled herself at the kitchen table, accepting a cup of coffee with gracious thanks. Her sharp eyes took in everything. Eli working outside the window. Thomas's easy chatter about Mr. Eli. The general air of purposeful activity. I'll come straight to the point, Mary said. Jake Dalton's been spreading tales in town. About you harboring a wanted man, about improper behavior. The usual gossip. Clara's stomach tightened. I see. Do you? Mary leaned forward. Because what I see is a woman trying to keep her ranch running and a man doing honest work. Whatever else he might be. Your Mr. McCready has been nothing but respectful in town the few times he's been seen. He's a good man. I believe you. More importantly, my husband believes you. Mary smiled. And what my husband believes tends to carry weight with the other ranchers. Jake Dalton's been a thorn in everyone's side for years. Too quick with accusations, too free with threats. Why are you telling me this? Because Jake made a mistake. He threatened my husband last month over water access, suggested he had ways of making people sign papers they didn't want to sign. Mary's expression hardened. My husband doesn't take kindly to threats. Neither do I. Hope stirred in Clara's chest. Would your husband testify to that, if it came to a legal matter? He would, as would several others Jake's tried to strong-arm over the years. Mary stood. You're not alone in this. Clara, remember that. And if the Rangers do come calling, well, sometimes men get delayed by weather, or their telegrams get misdirected. The territorial office is notably inefficient. After Mary left, Clara found Eli and told him about the conversation. He listened in silence, then shook his head. Don't count on help from townspeople when there's a bounty involved. She seemed sincere. Maybe, or maybe she's hoping to claim the reward herself. At Clara's hurt look, he softened. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to trust kindness from strangers. Then trust me. She took his hand. We have allies. Jake's made enemies. This isn't hopeless. He squeezed her fingers. All right, we'll try it your way, but I'm still sleeping light and keeping my guns clean. I wouldn't expect anything less. That afternoon, they began preparing in earnest. Eli taught Clara to shoot properly, not just point and pull the trigger, but how to aim, breathe, compensate for wind. Her hands were steady, her eye true. "You're a natural," he said after she put 6 shots in a tight group. "I have a good teacher," she lowered the rifle, "and good motivation." As the sun set, painting the snow pink and gold, they stood together on the porch. Thomas was inside, laboriously copying his letters. The ranch stretched before them, peaceful in the twilight. "It's beautiful here," Eli said quietly. "I can see why Samuel loved it." "He did, but he never fought for it. Not really." He thought talking and reasoning would be enough. Clara leaned against Eli's shoulder. "I won't make that mistake." "No," Eli agreed, wrapping an arm around her. "I don't believe you will." They watched the stars emerge one by one, and Clara felt the truth of it in her bones. Whatever came, Jake, the Rangers, the judgment of the town, she would face it, not alone, not afraid, but with this man beside her and hope in her heart. It was more than she'd had in months. For now, it was enough. The truth came from an unexpected source. Clara had ridden into Mercy's Bend for supplies, leaving Eli to work on reinforcing the barn doors. The general store was nearly empty. Most folks stayed home during the cold spell that followed the storm. She was examining bolts of cloth, thinking about making Thomas a new shirt, when she heard a soft voice behind her. "Mrs. Lorne." Clara turned to find a small woman she didn't recognize, though something about her seemed familiar. She was perhaps 30, with dark hair and nervous hands that wouldn't stop twisting her worn gloves. "Yes? I'm Martha Dalton, Jake's wife, former wife." The woman glanced around nervously. "I need to speak with you, privately." Clara's pulse quickened. "Of course. Would you like to come to the ranch?" "No." Martha's eyes widened with fear. "He can't know I talked to you, but there are things you need to know. About your husband. About Jake." They stepped outside, moving to the alley between buildings where they wouldn't be observed. Martha pulled her shawl tighter, shivering though the day wasn't particularly cold. "Jake killed your husband," she said without preamble. "I wasn't there, but I heard him bragging to his men afterward. Said Samuel was too stubborn to see sense about the water rights, so they had to convince him another way." Clara gripped the wall for support. She'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed was like being punched. "Why didn't you come forward before?" Martha touched her face, and Clara noticed the faint yellow of an old bruise along her jawline. "You know why. But I'm leaving. Tonight. Going back east to my sister. I couldn't go without trying to make something right. Will you testify? Write out a statement?" "I can't. I'm sorry. He'd find me." Martha reached into her bag, pulling out a leather folder. "But I took these from his office, papers he's been collecting. Some are forgeries, signatures that look like your husband's but aren't, and there are letters, planning documents, enough to prove what he intended. Maybe." Clara took the folder with trembling hands. "Why help me now?" "Because I heard about your man standing up to Jake. First person to face him down in years." Martha almost smiled. "And because Jake's planning something worse. He's got friends coming from Amarillo. Gunmen. They'll be here within the week." "How many?" "4, maybe 5. The kind of men who don't ask questions if the money's good." Martha glanced toward the street. "I have to go. Stage leaves in an hour. But Mrs. Lorne, be careful. Jake's meaner than a rattlesnake when he's cornered. And right now, he feels cornered." After Martha disappeared, Clara stood in the alley, clutching the folder. Her mind raced. They needed to act fast before Jake's reinforcements arrived. But first, she had to get home, had to warn Eli. She was so focused on her thoughts that she didn't notice the man following her until she was halfway home. It was one of Jake's regular hands, keeping pace but staying back. Clara forced herself not to panic, maintaining steady speed. But as she neared the ranch, she saw smoke rising from the direction of her barn. Too much smoke. She spurred her horse to a gallop. In the yard, she found chaos. The barn doors stood open, smoke pouring out. Eli was inside. She could hear him trying to calm the panicking horses. Thomas stood by the water pump, filling buckets as fast as his small hands could manage. "Get back!" Clara shouted at her son, leaping from her horse. "Get to the house!" "But Mr. Eli, now! Thomas!" She grabbed a bucket and ran for the barn. Inside, smoke stung her eyes and throat. Eli had gotten 2 horses out but was struggling with her mare, who was wild with fear. "The hay in the loft!" he shouted. "Someone set it burning!" Together they fought the panicking animal out into the fresh air. The fire hadn't spread to the structure yet. The green wood from the recent storm was resisting the flames. If they could contain it to the hay. "Keep pumping," Clara ordered Thomas, who had ignored her order to hide. "Eli, help me with the ladder." They worked with desperate efficiency, passing buckets up to dump on the smoldering hay. Clara's arms screamed with exhaustion. Her lungs burned from smoke, but she didn't stop. This barn was their survival. Without it, the animals would freeze come the next storm, after what felt like hours but was probably less than one. The last flames died. They stood in the smoky ruins of the loft, breathing hard, covered in soot and ash. "Look," Eli said quietly, pointing to the corner where the fire had started. Clear evidence of kerosene and something else, a piece of cloth that hadn't quite burned. Clara recognized the pattern. It was from a shirt she'd seen Jake wearing. "Sloppy," Eli observed. "He wanted us to know it was him. A warning. Or a distraction." Eli's eyes narrowed. "Thomas, where were you when the fire started?" "By the creek, looking for arrowheads like you showed me." The boy's eyes were wide with lingering fear. "I saw the smoke and ran back." "Did you see anyone?" "No, sir, just Mr. Peterson riding by on the road." Clara and Eli exchanged glances. Peterson was one of Jake's men, the one who'd followed her from town. They were watching. Clara said, "Waiting until we separated. Testing our defenses." Eli surveyed the damage. "We were lucky. Next time." "There won't be a next time." Clara pulled out Martha's folder. "We need to talk. Inside." They sent Thomas to wash up while they examined the documents. Clara's hands shook as she showed Eli the forged signatures. The correspondence discussing removing obstacles to land consolidation. Most damning was a letter in Jake's hand, dated a week before Samuel's death, discussing payment for specialized work to men in Amarillo. "This is evidence of conspiracy," Eli said slowly. "Real evidence, enough to hang him. Martha said he has more men coming. Gunmen from Amarillo." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then we take this to the sheriff now, today." "Sheriff Watson's useless. You know that." "Then the federal marshal in Santa Fe. This is bigger than local law now." He studied her face. "What is it?" Clara hesitated. "If we involve federal law, they'll run your name. Your wanted posters." "I know. Eli, it doesn't matter." He caught her hands. "This is our chance to end it, to prove Jake killed Samuel, to secure your claim to this land. I won't let my past stop that." "But they'll arrest you." "Maybe, maybe not. It was Texas law I ran from, not federal. And with what I can testify about Jake's threats," he shrugged. "It's a risk worth taking." Clara felt tears threaten. This man, who'd spent years running from the law, was willing to face it for her. "For them, we'll go together," she said. "Tomorrow." Mary Henderson said she'd watch Thomas. That night, they prepared as if for war. Eli cleaned and loaded every weapon on the property. Clara packed the documents carefully, making copies of the most important ones. They discussed routes to Santa Fe, what to do if Jake tried to stop them. "If something happens," Eli said, "you take Thomas and run. Don't look back. Nothing's going to happen." "Clara, no!" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "We're going to ride to Santa Fe, show the marshal these papers, and Jake Dalton is going to prison. Then we're coming home and starting our life together properly." He caught her hand, pressing it to his cheek. "You really believe that?" "I have to." Later, as Clara checked on Thomas one last time, she found him awake, clutching the wooden horse Eli had carved for him. "Are the bad men coming back?" he whispered. Clara sat on his bed, smoothing his hair. "No, sweetheart, Mr. Eli and I won't let them. Is he going to be my new PA?" The question caught her off guard. Would you like that?" Thomas nodded solemnly. "He teaches me things, and he makes you smile like you used to." "Oh, baby." Clara hugged him close, breathing in his little boy's scent. "We'll see what happens, but whatever comes, we're going to be all right. Promise?" "I promise." But as she left his room, Clara felt the weight of that promise. Tomorrow they would ride into danger, trusting in law that had failed them before, risking everything on the hope that truth might actually prevail. She found Eli on the porch, keeping watch as always. Without speaking, she settled beside him, and he wrapped a blanket around them both. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles, but Clara found comfort in their constancy. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. "Terrified?" His arm tightened around her. "But not of what you think. I've faced death before, faced prison. That's not what scares me." "Then what?" "Hoping," his voice was rough, "believing this could work, that I could have this, you, Thomas, a real home, that terrifies me more than any rope or bullet." Clara turned in his arms, cupping his face. "Then be terrified with me, because I'm scared too, scared of losing you, of failing Thomas, of not being strong enough, but I'm more scared of not trying." He kissed her then, soft and sweet with promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I know," she whispered. "I love you too." They sat together until dawn, watching the darkness give way to light. Clara thought about cycles, how the sun always rose, how spring always followed winter, how sometimes you had to burn away the old to make room for the new. The fire in the barn had been meant to break them. Instead, it had forged them stronger, like steel in a smith's flame. Tomorrow would bring its own trials. But tonight, she had this, Eli's arms around her, his heartbeat steady against her back, and the unshakable certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. The eastern sky blushed pink with dawn, and Clara rose to start coffee and prepare for the journey ahead. She looked back once at Eli, still keeping watch, his profile sharp against the lightening sky. "Ready?" he asked without turning. "Yes," she said, and meant it. She was ready to fight for her land, for her son's future, for the love she'd found in the most unlikely place. Martha Dalton's evidence lay secure in her saddlebags. Jake's own greed and cruelty turned against him. The road to Santa Fe stretched ahead, dangerous but necessary. Clara squared her shoulders and went inside to wake Thomas. Time to stop running, stop hiding, stop letting fear dictate their choices. Time to claim the life they deserved, no matter who stood in their way. They never made it to Santa Fe. 10 miles from the ranch, where the trail narrowed between two rocky outcroppings, Jake and 6 men blocked their path. Clara's heart sank as she recognized not just his regular hands, but new faces, hard men with the look of those who killed for coin. "Morning, Clara," Jake called out, his voice falsely cheerful. "Heard you were taking a trip. Thought we'd see you off proper." Eli had reined up the moment they'd spotted the ambush, his hand resting on his gun. "Let us pass. Dalton." "Can't do that. See, a little bird told me you might be carrying some papers that belong to me." Jake's eyes glittered dangerously. "Can't have you spreading lies to the federal boys." "They're not lies," Clara said, lifting her chin. "Your wife." "Ex-wife," Jake corrected. Poor Martha. Always was prone to hysterics, making up stories. He smiled coldly. "Shame about her accident." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What accident?" "Stage overturned last night. Terrible tragedy. No survivors." Jake shrugged. "These mountain roads are treacherous." Beside her, Clara felt Eli go very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. She reached out, touching his arm in warning. "You're going to turn around now." Jake continued. "Go back to your ranch, pack your things, and be gone by week's end. I'll even buy the place from you. Fair price. Enough to start over somewhere else." "No. No," Jake laughed. "Clara, you're outnumbered and outgunned. Your drifter might be fast, but he's not that fast. Be sensible." Like Samuel was sensible? The words burst out before Clara could stop them. "Before you shot him in the back?" The false friendliness dropped from Jake's face. "Careful, woman. That's a dangerous accusation." "It's the truth." "Truth?" Jake spat to the side. "Your husband was a fool who didn't understand progress. This valley's too valuable to waste on small-timers who can't see the bigger picture. I offered him partnership. He refused. So you killed him?" "I removed an obstacle." Jake's hand moved to his gun. "Just like I'm about to remove another one." Everything happened at once. Eli shoved Clara off her horse just as gunfire erupted. She hit the ground hard, rolling behind a boulder as bullets whined overhead. Through the chaos, she saw Eli's horse rear and bolt. Eli rolling free with fluid grace, his gun already in his hand. The air filled with smoke and thunder. Clara pressed herself against the rock, fumbling for Samuel's revolver. Her hands shook as she checked the chambers. 6 shots. That's all she had. "Clara!" Eli's voice, from somewhere to her left. "Stay down!" She peered around the boulder in time to see him fire twice. One of Jake's men spun and fell. Another clutched his shoulder, cursing, but there were still too many, and they had the high ground. "Give up, McCready!" Jake shouted. "You're pinned down. Throw out your guns and I might let the woman live." Clara saw Eli shifting position, using the scattered rocks for cover. He was trying to flank them, but it was suicide. Too much open ground. "I've got 12 men coming from Amarillo," Jake continued. "Even if you get lucky here, you'll never make it a week. But I'm feeling generous. You leave now, alone, and I'll let you ride out." "Go to hell," Eli called back. More gunfire. Clara saw dust kick up inches from where Eli crouched. Her heart hammered against her ribs. They were going to die here, in this nameless canyon. And Thomas would be orphaned twice over. No, not like this. Clara spotted what Eli was attempting. If he could reach the cottonwood grove 20 yards east, he'd have cover and a clear shot at Jake's position. But they'd cut him down the moment he broke from the rocks, unless they were distracted, before she could lose her nerve. Clara burst from her hiding spot, running not away from the gunmen but toward them, firing Samuel's revolver as she ran. It was madness, suicide, but it worked. The gunmen swung their weapons toward her, giving Eli the seconds he needed. She felt the bullet before she heard it, a punch of fire in her side that spun her around, sent her tumbling into the dust. The revolver flew from her hand, through the ringing in her ears. She heard Eli roar her name, heard the sudden intensity of his gunfire. Clara pressed her hand to her side, felt warmth seeping between her fingers. The sky above seemed impossibly blue, impossibly distant. She thought of Thomas, of his solemn little face as he'd asked if Eli would be his new PA. She'd promised him everything would be all right. Liars make poor mothers. The gunfire was slowing now. Clara turned her head, tasting copper, and saw Eli advancing from the cottonwoods like an avenging angel. His face was terrible in its focus, his movements economical and deadly. 2 more of Jake's men fell. The others were scattering, including Jake himself, spurring their horses in full retreat. Then Eli was there, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands gentle but urgent as they examined her wound. "Clara, no, no, no!" His voice broke. "What were you thinking? Had to give you a chance." Speaking hurt, breathing hurt, everything hurt. "You beautiful fool." He was tearing strips from his shirt, pressing them against her side. "Stay with me. You hear me? You stay with me." "Thomas, we'll have both his parents. You understand? Both of us." Eli gathered her into his arms, standing with effort. "Because you're not dying on me. Clara Lorne, I forbid it." Despite everything, she almost smiled. "Forbid? That's right. I'm a dangerous outlaw. Remember, you have to do what I say." The journey back to the ranch blurred in and out of focus. Clara was aware of movement, of Eli's voice talking constantly, telling her about places he'd seen, people he'd known, dreams he'd never shared with anyone. She understood he was trying to keep her conscious, keep her fighting. "Going to build Thomas a treehouse," he said as they neared home. "Every boy needs a treehouse, and teach him to fish. Never did much fishing, but I can learn." "Eli, going to court you proper too. Don't think I forgot about that. Dancing and flowers and all those things you deserve." His arms tightened around her. "Going to marry you, Clara. Make it official before God and everybody." "You hear me?" She wanted to answer. Wanted to tell him yes to all of it, but darkness was creeping in from the edges of her vision. The last thing she heard was Eli shouting for help, and then nothing at all. Clara woke to lamplight and familiar voices. Mary Henderson's face swam into focus, lined with worry, but smiling. "There you are," Mary said softly. "You gave us quite a scare." Clara tried to speak, coughed instead. Mary helped her sip water, supporting her carefully. "Easy now. The doctor said the bullet went clean through. Missed anything vital, thank the Lord, though you lost enough blood to water a garden. Eli," Clara managed, "is wearing a groove in my floor with his pacing." Mary's smile widened. "He hasn't left your side in 3 days, except when we bodily threw him out to eat something. Even then, he wolfed it down like a wild animal and rushed back." 3 days. Clara struggled to process this. "Thomas is fine. Worried about his mama, but Eli's been good with him. They've been taking turns reading to you." Mary adjusted Clara's pillows. "That's a good man you've got there." "Jake?" Mary's expression darkened. "In federal custody. Eli rode straight to the telegraph office after we got you stable. Wired the marshals in Santa Fe. They were very interested in those documents you were carrying, especially after 2 more of Jake's men turned themselves in to avoid hanging. Seems they're willing to testify about a lot of things, including your husband's murder." Clara closed her eyes, relief washing over her. It was over. Really over. "I'll fetch Eli," Mary said. "He'll never forgive me if—" The door burst open before she could finish. Eli stood there, looking haggard, his clothes rumpled, his face unshaven. But his eyes, when they found Clara, were bright with joy. "You're awake." He crossed to her in 3 strides, then seemed to catch himself, slowing as if afraid to jostle her. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been shot," Clara said, managing a weak smile. "That's not funny." But his lips twitched. He took her hand carefully, as if she might break. "You scared 10 years off my life." "Just 10? Clara," his voice went serious. "What you did out there, don't ever do that again, you understand? Never again. I saved your life. You nearly got yourself killed. So did you. Multiple times." She squeezed his fingers. "That's what people do when they love each other. They take risks. They fight for each other." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Marry me." "What?" "I know this isn't how it's supposed to go. I should have a ring, should be on one knee, but I nearly lost you, and I can't—" He took a breath. "Marry me, Clara. Let me be Thomas's father, legal and proper. Let me wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours. Let me—" "Yes." He blinked. "Yes? Did you think I'd say no after all this?" She tugged weakly at his hand. "Come here." He leaned down carefully, and she kissed him, soft and sweet despite her split lip. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "More than I thought possible. More than is probably safe." "Good," Clara murmured. "Because I plan to be very demanding. Tree houses and fishing lessons and proper courting even after we're married. Anything, everything." A small cough from the doorway made them look up. Thomas stood there, clutching his wooden horse, eyes wide with hope. "Mama, are you better? Come here, sweetheart." Thomas approached slowly, clearly afraid of hurting her. Eli lifted him carefully onto the bed beside Clara. "I'm going to be fine," she told him. "And I have something to tell you." How would you feel about Eli becoming your PA, real and official? Thomas's face lit up like sunrise. Really? Really, Eli confirmed. If you'll have me. Instead of answering, Thomas threw his arms around Eli's neck, over the boy's head. Eli's eyes met Clara's, and she saw everything there. Love, gratitude, promise, home. We're going to be a family, Thomas said, his voice muffled against Eli's shirt. A real family. Yes, Clara said, reaching out to touch both of them. We are. Outside, snow began to fall again. Gentle this time, like a blessing. But inside Mary Henderson's spare room, warmth surrounded them, not just from the fire, but from the bonds being forged, the promises being made, the future taking shape. Jake Dalton would hang for Samuel's murder. The ranch was safe. And Clara had found something she'd never dared hope for, a love that was worth bleeding for, fighting for, living for. As Thomas chattered excitedly about having a PA who could teach him to shoot and track and build tree houses, Clara met Eli's eyes again. He smiled, that rare, real smile that transformed his weathered face, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that every scar, every loss, every lonely mile had led them here, to each other, to home. The federal courthouse in Santa Fe stood like a monument to justice, its adobe walls baking in the spring sun. Clara adjusted her best dress, the blue one Eli said matched her eyes, and tried to calm her nerves. 6 weeks had passed since the shooting, 6 weeks of healing and preparation for this day. You ready? Eli asked quietly, his hand finding hers. He looked uncomfortable in his borrowed suit, but handsome in a way that made her heart skip. The hard edges were still there, would always be there, but softened now by something that might have been contentment. Ready, Clara confirmed. Thomas walked between them, unusually solemn in his Sunday clothes. He'd been practicing his testimony for days, determined to help put the bad man away. Clara's heart ached with pride and worry in equal measure. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the widow standing up to Jake Dalton, about the gunfighter who'd risked his freedom to see justice done. Mary Henderson nodded encouragingly from the gallery. Other ranchers Clara barely knew had come to watch, their faces reflecting the same hope. If Jake could fall, maybe the territory could finally move past the era of might making right. Jake sat at the defendant's table, shackled but still defiant. His eyes found Clara, promising retribution even now. She lifted her chin and stared back. Those eyes had no power over her anymore. The prosecutor, a thin man from Washington with sharp eyes behind wire spectacles, had warned them it would be difficult. Jake had money for good lawyers, had friends in surprising places, but he also had enemies. And Martha's documents, retrieved from her belongings after the stage accident, painted a damning picture. Clara testified first, her voice steady as she recounted finding Samuel's body, Jake's threats, the attempt on her life. The defense attorney tried to shake her story, suggesting she'd taken up with a known outlaw, that her testimony was motivated by greed. Clara met each accusation with calm truth. Mr. McCready saved my life, she said firmly, and risked his own freedom to ensure my husband's killer faced justice. I'd say that speaks to his character more than any wanted poster. Thomas testified briefly, describing the fire, the fear, the way Uncle Jake had scared him. His simple honesty brought tears to more than one eye in the gallery. Then it was Eli's turn. Clara held her breath as he took the stand. This was the moment she'd dreaded. His past would be laid bare, his crimes exposed. The prosecutor had promised immunity for his testimony, but only for the federal charges. Texas law might still come calling. State your full name for the record, the bailiff instructed. Eli Rafe McCready. Mr. McCready, the prosecutor began. Are you the same Eli McCready wanted in Texas for the deaths of 3 men? I am. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Clara saw hands drift toward weapons, even here, but Eli sat straight, unashamed. "Tell us about those deaths." Eli's testimony was spare but powerful. He described finding Maria, described the scene in clinical detail that made several ladies fan themselves. He admitted to killing the men, admitted to escaping custody. "Do you regret your actions?" the prosecutor asked. "I regret that killing was necessary," Eli said carefully. "I regret that the law offered no justice for a Mexican girl against powerful white men. But given the same circumstances, I would make the same choice." "And what choice was that?" "To protect someone who couldn't protect herself. Same choice I made when Jake Dalton threatened Mrs. Lorne." The defense attorney rose, smelling blood. "You're asking this court to take the word of a convicted killer, a man who's admitted to gunning down 3 citizens." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "Mr. McCready was never tried or convicted. Because he fled justice." The judge banged his gavel. "Gentlemen, Mr. McCready's past is relevant only as it pertains to his credibility. Proceed." But Eli had already made his impact. As he detailed Jake's threats, the ambush, the confession Jake had made while believing he'd won, the courtroom listened with rapt attention. This wasn't just about Clara's ranch anymore. It was about the kind of territory New Mexico would become. The trial lasted 3 days. Jake's former associates testified under immunity deals, each revelation worse than the last. Jake hadn't just killed Samuel. He'd been systematically forcing out small ranchers for years, using intimidation, forgery, and when necessary, murder. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Clara felt her knees buckle with relief. Eli caught her, holding her steady as Jake was led away. "Sentenced to hang." The courtroom erupted in cheers, but Clara heard only Eli's whisper, "It's over. It's finally over." Outside, in the harsh sunlight, Marshal Davidson approached them. Clara tensed, but the federal man's expression was thoughtful rather than threatening. "Mr. McCready," he said, "that was brave. What you did in there, not many men would risk their neck for justice." "I had my reasons," Eli said carefully. "I imagine you did." The marshal studied him. "I've been in touch with the authorities in Texas. Interesting thing, seems there's been some new testimony about that incident 5 years back. A woman named Maria Sandoval, married name Reyes, came forward. Says you saved her life, that her father's killers drew first." Clara felt Eli go still beside her. "Maria's alive?" "Very much so. Has 3 children and a husband who thinks you ought to be given a medal, not a noose." Davidson smiled slightly. "The judge in Austin is reviewing the case, given Mrs. Reyes' testimony and some concerns about the original trial. Well, let's say you might want to have your lawyer file some paperwork." After the marshal left, Eli stood frozen, staring at nothing. Clara touched his arm gently. "Eli?" "She made it," he said wonderingly. "Maria made it. She has children, a life. Because of you." He turned to her then, and she saw tears in his eyes for the first time. I carried that weight for so long, wondering if it mattered. If saving one girl was worth everything that came after." "It was," Clara said firmly. "It led you to me, didn't it?" 2 months later, on a perfect June morning, Clara stood in the little church in Mercy's Bend wearing her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. The pews were packed. News of their story had spread, turning them into unlikely celebrities. But Clara had eyes only for the man waiting at the altar, looking uncomfortable but determined in his new black suit. Thomas stood beside Eli as best man, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd taken to calling Eli Pa weeks ago, each time bringing a soft wonder to Eli's eyes that made Clara's heart clench. Mary Henderson played the piano as Clara walked down the aisle alone. She needed no one to give her away. She was giving herself freely and with full knowledge of what she chose. Eli's face when he saw her was worth every moment of pain that had brought them here. He took her hands with infinite tenderness, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers. This man who'd faced down gunmen without flinching was nervous about pledging his heart before God and witnesses. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Mills began, but Clara barely heard the familiar words. She was lost in Eli's eyes, in the promise she saw there. When it came time for vows, Eli surprised her by speaking his own. "Clara," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "you gave me shelter when I was a stranger. You saw something worth saving in a man who'd forgotten he had any worth at all. You fought beside me, bled beside me, and somehow decided I was worth keeping." He squeezed her hands. "I promise to spend every day earning that faith, to be the husband you deserve, the father Thomas needs, and the man you've helped me remember I could be." Clara was crying by the time he finished, not caring who saw. "Eli," she managed, "you came to my door looking for water and gave me back my life. You showed me that strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing who to stand with. You brought light back into my son's eyes and fire back into my heart." She smiled through her tears. "I promise to love you through whatever storms may come, to trust in the home we're building, and to never, ever lock you out again." "The rings," Reverend Mills prompted. Thomas stepped forward proudly, producing the simple gold bands they'd chosen in Santa Fe. As Eli slipped the ring onto Clara's finger, she remembered another circle, the walls she'd built around her heart after Samuel died. The barrier she'd thought would keep her safe. How wrong she'd been. Safety wasn't in walls, but in the courage to tear them down, to let love in despite the risk. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "You may kiss your bride." Eli cupped her face gently, mindful of the crowd. "Hello, Mrs. McCready," he whispered. "Hello, husband," she whispered back. Their kiss was soft, sweet, a promise of private moments to come. The church erupted in cheers, Thomas whooping loudest of all. At the reception in the churchyard, Clara watched Eli navigate the crowd with growing confidence. He'd never be entirely comfortable with attention, but he no longer looked ready to bolt. When old Mr. Patterson clapped him on the back and declared he'd always known Eli was good people, Eli actually smiled. "Happy?" Mary asked, appearing at Clara's elbow with a cup of punch. "Beyond words," Clara admitted. "Good, you deserve it, both of you." Mary's expression grew sly. "So, when can we expect an addition to the family?" Clara blushed. "Mary!" "What? That man looks at you like you hung the moon. And you're still young enough?" Before Clara could respond, Eli appeared, Thomas riding on his shoulders. "Mrs. McCready," he said formally, though his eyes danced. "Might I have this dance?" The fiddler had started a waltz. Clara took Eli's hand, letting him lead her into the center of the makeshift dance floor. Thomas slid down to dance with Mary, his face serious with concentration. "I should warn you," Eli murmured as they moved together. "I'm not much of a dancer. You're doing fine," Clara assured him. Indeed, he moved with the same natural grace he brought to everything physical, quickly finding the rhythm. "I still can't believe you married me," he said quietly. "Keep thinking I'll wake up back in that drafty barn, and this will all have been a dream." "Believe it," Clara said firmly. "You're stuck with me now. Eli McCready. Forever, forever," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "I like the sound of that." As they danced in the afternoon sun, surrounded by friends and neighbors, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here, the locked door that hadn't kept danger out, the whispered promise that had changed everything, the violence and fear they'd faced and overcome. Every scar had been worth it for this moment, dancing with her husband while her son laughed, their ranch safe and their future bright with possibility. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked. "That I love you," Clara said simply, "and that I'm glad you broke in that night." He spun her gently, then pulled her close again. "Best crime I ever committed." He agreed. The music played on, and Clara closed her eyes, letting herself be held by this man who'd entered her life like a dust devil and stayed like the mountains. Solid, protective, permanent. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The ranch needed work. Thomas needed raising, and they needed to learn how to be a family forged from loss and hope in equal measure. But today, in this perfect moment, Clara McCready danced with her husband under the New Mexico sun and knew that every locked door was meant to be opened by the right whispered word. "I love you," Eli said against her hair. The word still new enough to his lips to sound like revelation. "And I love you." Clara replied, "Always." The fiddle sang. The sun shone. And somewhere in the distance, the mountains stood eternal guard over a love that had conquered death, overcome injustice, and proven that sometimes the most dangerous chances were the ones most worth taking. They were home. They were family. They were whole. Thank you so much for listening to this tale of love and redemption in the Old West. I'd love to know where in the world you're enjoying this story. Please share in the comments below. If you enjoyed Clara and Eli's journey, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of passion, courage, and adventure on the frontier. What did you think of their romance? Did the ending satisfy your heart? Share your thoughts. I read every comment and love connecting with fellow lovers of Western tales.